I had a great conversation with Dan Pfeiffer from Pod Save America on my Substack Live. Make sure you're subscribed at substack.davidpakman.com so you can actually watch these live as they happen. Let's check out that conversation now.
I am here today with Dan Pfeiffer from Pod Save America, a best-selling author in his own right, with numerous campaign credentials in his storied past. It's really good to have you. I'm glad to talk to you today.
It's great. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, so I'm excited to do
Oh,
this.
thank you. Likewise, it's mutual. Well, listen. I mean, to start with, I recent scandals notwithstanding, I've been more and more concerned and displeased, I think are the words I would say, with what I'm kind of seeing from the Democratic Party over the last year. And I did a piece recently where I kind of said, I was kind of optimistic after the failure in 24. Offices from, mayors all the way up to President Biden actually have been engaging more with independent media, trying to figure out what went wrong, cautiously optimistic. And like, I'm not super impressed with what's going on. It's still kind of like what I've identified as the same tired risk aversion and sort of lack of understanding for how to work with us. Not that independent media is how Democrats are going to win elections, but my point is, after everything that's happened, I'm feeling like not really that much has kind of changed, and Democrats are potentially just pointing in the same direction for 26 and 28 further away. Let me just open it to you. Like, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like there was this moment where, and I think it was an oversimplification of the election, and it's sort of almost a crutch for political parties to be like, the problem was we didn't do enough podcasts, we didn't do enough YouTube shows, we didn't engage with independent media and content creators. Because if you pick that as the main, and I think that's all true. Like I think our media strategy was outdated. We needed to do more. We got dominated the information space. That's all true. What that when you pick that as the primary reason, it allows you to align more challenging questions about like what you actually stand for. Do you have anything to say when you go on independent media? Like I think that's one of the problems. Like I've been to meet with the House caucus, I've been to meet with the Senate caucus, I've talked to a bunch of politicians, and I'm doing like presentations on podcasts and presentations on YouTube and like how YouTube's the new TV and all of that. And like they get it theoretically, like they hear it. Some of them are truly shocked. Like one presentation that I pointed out just pretty simply that an individual episode of Pod Save America has twice the primetime audience of CNN, and you would have heard a pin drop in the room. So they're like trying to get it, but I think the thing that is missing, and some of them are better than others, right? Like sort of a younger generation of people who really get it. There's some, people with presidential ambitions like Newsome who are really aggressively doing some of the strategies. Is you kind of got to have something to say. You got to be willing because you can't just take your CNN, MSNBC talking points and bring them to a 3-hour interview with Flagrant or to talk to you or to talk to us because that's not what the audience is looking for. And so, yeah, I do worry that we are like appending on this new thing, like which is like we're going to do podcasts, we're going to do YouTube, we're going to talk to TikTokers, but we're adding it to this old playbook we've still had before, which is about more than just like where you say it; it's what you say and how you say it.
Yeah, there's a degree to which it's sort of like saying you're going to write a strongly worded letter.
Yes.
It's not going to work that much better on independent podcasts than it works anywhere.
No.
Is sort of, I think, what you're getting at.
Yeah.
I'm interested because you've clearly had more conversations from the point of view of like presenting than I have. I've had some conversations with members of the House
Yeah.
and their staffs off air, for example, where I try to explain why it doesn't work for a not particularly well-known member of the House to come on my show and go through 6 topics in 12 minutes and then say, I got to run.
Yeah.
And part of it is I don't think my audience really connects with that in an authentic way. It's just sort of like, let me go through my bullet points.
Yeah.
But also, I think a big aspect of what Trump and the right did really well in 2024 is it didn't feel as much as though there was a political agenda during some of these appearances, even though it obviously is political. There's a point here. We're running elections. But like when Trump went on with the Nelk boys, it was an atrocity from the standpoint of like, did he say things that were true and were they good ideas? But it seemed sort of unscripted, which it probably was.
Yeah.
It seemed like authentic Trump. He talked about things that weren't political. there was just something about it that connected with voters who are not already in the hyper political space, which I think is also like another aspect of this, which is I can figure out 10 different ways to talk to my audience, but most of the country doesn't listen to overtly political content. And it seems that that's an area that the Democrats haven't yet really cracked.
Yeah, there's a real like one of the things that I try to tell Democrats is one, like I said, like you can't do your CNN thing on independent media. Like that does not work. And you can't, and if you sound like a politician, like these are people who are, it's not just people listening or watching us, it's people, who are on some of these, Barstool, Nelk Boys, more further left stuff, cultural stuff. These people have already opted out of the traditional way of getting their news. So they already bring to bear some sort of skepticism of politics and institutional, sort of the institutions around politics. And so if you just sound like a politician, you're not going to succeed. So I try to tell people sometimes what you're going to do. And this is a thing that Trump, I think, does well. I don't think it's a plan. It just happens is just like find like what are the things you care about that are not just politics that you can find a way to talk about, right? That could be sports, it could be reality TV, it could be movies, it could be books, it could be painting, just where you can try to connect with people like on a human level. And this isn't rocket science, like because this is, I mean, I always say that when I worked for President Obama, every year, no matter how busy we were, the thing he was like sacrosanct on the schedule was we were going to do his March Madness bracket on ESPN because it was a thing he liked doing. It was authentic to him. He loved basketball, and he was doing it at a time in which everyone around the country was also doing their brackets, whether they're serious sports fans or they're just like doing the office pool or the family pool. And it's like you seem like a human, and you got to find ways to seem like a human. And if you're just reading these like poll tested talking points, you're not achieving anything. You're just reminding people why they don't like politics.
I'm curious if you have specific thoughts about the right. I don't know if it's language, talking points, or messaging that maybe Democrats are going to have to adopt, but to give some examples of what I'm identifying that isn't working well. You think about Kamala Harris's campaign and her ideas for the economy.
Mhm.
When I ask people what were her ideas for the economy, almost no one can say anything. Some people do remember this idea she had about we're going to have it's either a tax credit or deduction, I don't even remember, against expenses when you start a new business. So it's like sort of convoluted and it only applies to a small portion of the population. So when I have elected officials on, they say, no, well, we have to have a clear economic message and it has to be abundantly clear that we are the ones that are here for the middle class and here's how we're going to do it. But like, what exactly does that look like in your mind? Is it more of a language thing? Is it a policies thing? Like, here are the three specific things. Because the exit polling did show what Bernie Sanders said, which was overall, the feeling wasn't when I think about Harris and Trump, I feel really strongly that Harris has my back as a middle class person. Voters didn't buy that. So, like, what do you think actually needs to be said?
I think it's a combination of things. One, it is we have to have like more emotionally evocative language. Like this is what Bernie does very well, right? Where it's like you get it. People know Medicare for all. They probably know he wants to tax the rich. Maybe they know about a billionaire tax, but what they get is he thinks rich people and corporations are screwing you over, and he's going to do something about it. And so, just like being that clear, AOC did that very well in the fight for oligarchy tour they did together. So that's one. Two, when we have policies, I think we have to have our policy. Like, this is going to drive my governing friends, my policy friends from the White House and campaigns insane. We need less serious policies. We need policies that are simpler, easy to understand. Like, this is the beauty of Zora Mandani's campaign is people, free buses and city-run grocery stores do a couple of things. They're not going to solve all, obviously not going to solve all the affordability problems, but they're easy to understand. They send a message to people that he's doing something that they get. And they're controversial enough that they piss off people so that then there's a conversation about it. Like if you just, I know all the people who wrote Kamala Harris's housing tax credits and her business tax credits and all of that. And they're as smart as can be. And they're the people you want in her White House when it comes time to say it, the economy. But it can't be a white paper. It's got to be an idea that people get. Obama had this idea that he did in the State of the Union in 2012. It was called the Buffett Rule, which was simply that no one could pay a tax that Warren Buffett's secretary was paying a lower tax rate than he did, and we can't allow that to happen. And that she sat in the box from the State of the Union. Like that obviously doesn't solve our massively convoluted broken tax system, but it's something people got. And so we need some ideas that are simple. They get them. They may not like pass all of the like the nerdy checks and from the policy wonks, but they send a message. I mean, that's what build the wall is. It's an absurd policy, but it sent a very clear message to people what Trump's priorities were. And we need some policies like that.
As you talk about that, I'm reminded of, I'm from Argentina originally. It's been a long time since Argentina had what I would call a good president. And one of the guys that wasn't good was this guy Macri, who's friends with Trump, actually. And he had this very visible idea, which was he built a rapid transit bus in like a very important, highly trafficked part of Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
And so all of these disasters were going on, corruption and terrible economic policy. But there was this like emotionally salient thing about like on 9th of July Avenue, the widest street in the world, they've got different colored lanes and these brand new buses, and they're zooming back and forth. And a lot of his defenders, who couldn't really defend a lot of the stuff that he did, they would go, look at this bus. It's just phenomenal. It's fantastic. You can see it right there. And it seems that the emotional salience of some of this stuff seems highly relevant.
Yeah, I think we just got to be more. We have to grab people's attention, and you need policies that do that.
You've worked for Al Gore. You mentioned working for Barack Obama. You've seen a lot of different campaigns.
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you about, from the outside, there was this perception I had and some others had that like the first couple of weeks of Kamala Harris's campaign had a certain vibe or feel.
Yeah.
And then after the 2 weeks, something happened and it got less good, less dynamic, less exciting, etc. What happens within a campaign? Like when these shifts happen, is it that someone is brought in and they go, we got to do everything completely differently? Is it that there's a push-pull for the candidate's support or the candidate's confidence, and then the candidate goes, we're going to go more this way than that way? Like what causes these kind of shifts in campaigns?
So I'm also looking at this from the outside in. Like I got a lot of friends who work there, but I don't have like all the inside detail. They
Yep.
just
Yep.
like give me the dirt. But I'd say a couple of things. One, every campaign is a reflection on the candidate. So if a candidate is risk averse, the campaign is risk averse. Like you just can't. If a candidate politician, and most politicians, particularly Democratic politicians, are risk averse, they no matter how brilliant the campaign team is, no matter how great the messaging is, you can't change that factor of it. That was, and you saw some of that in her 2019 primary race. So that's one. Two, I think when they first started, they really benefited from, they were playing with house money. Like one day she's vice president, next day she's in this race. Like who knows what else can happen. I remember she went to headquarters right after Biden dropped out, and she basically got the nomination, and she went there and she gave this great speech. It seems like off the cuff. There was no, maybe she had some written notes, but it was not like put together by a team of 100 people. She just kind of like did her thing, and it was quite good. And then I think as you get more people and you are naturally risk averse, and my friends who worked for John Kerry say the similar, is that you can always find someone who will validate your risk aversion to avoid doing something. And so I think that sort of defaulted to the way she was. And I mean, she was hampered in the sense that she took on this campaign. She kept most of the leadership of the old campaign. Then she added in her new people. And that's not probably a particularly efficient way to make decisions quickly. And that probably hampered them. But, you kind of saw it in her media choices, right? She was very just risk averse in how much media she did. I mean, she did something like Call Her Daddy was a bold choice, I think. Even if it did read more like or seem more like a political interview than a Call Her Daddy episode. But I think it was, and they didn't, and I think the other thing that I think is fair is she could never really articulate like why she was doing this, which did I say in her defense, she didn't choose to do it, right? It wasn't like, normally you have a year of the primary campaign and you're out there and you're talking to people, you're doing a million town halls, a million interviews, and you can like hone your rationale. She just had to do it from a standing start. But like that like, why me? Why I'm doing this? Why I'm the unique person? Like is critical to everything you do. It's the framework for why you make every decision. And that seemed a little bit like a vacuum. Even if she did, I will say in her defense, deliver in big moments like the convention speech and the debate.
For my context to know how to kind of frame this, did you read either or both of Jake Tapper's book and Jonathan Allen's book?
I read Jake Tapper's book. I have not read Jonathan Allen's book.
Okay. There's some overlap in the two books about the degree to which there was a lot going on behind the scenes in the Democratic Party in terms of people who didn't seem that thrilled with the idea of Kamala Harris kind of being the default. You know, the books are sort of mixed in my mind now because I read them very close together, but the narrative about former President Obama resisting and resisting an endorsement and sort of working behind the scenes, maybe for a mini primary. And then this dramatic scene of Chuck Schumer going to Biden's Delaware home and basically saying, like, you got to do it. And he was crying on the way home, you know, all these sort of factions. Is your sense either from your experience working in the Democratic Party or from people you've spoken to or whatever, right? You can tell us what it's based on. Is your sense that that is typical in every election, or that there was something about these particular circumstances with Biden saying, I'm stepping back, and Harris looking for the delegates and getting them, that generated that within the party?
I think it's unique. Like, I would say it's primarily unique to this election. This is obviously, we throw around the term unprecedented a lot these days, but I think this is legitimately unprecedented. Unprecedented. You have the incumbent president of the United States drop out 107 days or whatever it is before the election.
Yep.
And I think there was, people in that month period between the debate and when Biden actually dropped out, or 3 weeks, whatever it was, I was part of a gazillion conversations, not with anyone who was making any decisions, just really like idle chatter among Democratic operatives and staffers and politicians about, like, should he do it? Should Biden drop out? If he does drop out, can Kamala Harris pull it off? Is she the right person? And those conversations didn't amount to anything, because what ultimately happened is no one else ran. The question on, like, the mini primary and all of that is, I think there was this sense among some people in the party, and I had some of these conversations, that was, if other people wanted to run, right? But that could be Gavin Newsom, it could be Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, Wes Moore, whoever else who decided they want to throw their hat in the ring. The Democratic Party needed a process. So it didn't look like, you're just handing it to one person over the other, because that would be probably politically unwise and lead to a divided party. But then ultimately, no one decided, much like the primary against Biden that never materialized, no one wanted to run against Harris, probably because they recognized what most people did, which is she was probably going to win any sort of whatever that process was, she would win. So I think this one is unique. The closest analogous thing, I think, is when Obama and Clinton, at least from my experience, were in this primary that would not end in 2008. And it was pretty clear that Obama was going to win. And then there were some real discussions behind the scenes from a lot of party players about how do we land this thing in a way that allows the party to reunite when the primary is over, right? How can you, because it was, you have a black candidate, you have someone running to be the first female president. How does the process play out in the right way? And that's the kind of things where, like, the equivalent of the time where Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi to Schumer and the others involved this time. And they got involved in a way, but they couldn't, but they weren't, like, it was all sort of trying to just land the plane. I think that's what was happening here. I think that they just had no idea what to expect. And I think Kamala Harris knocked it out of the park, as you mentioned, those first 2 weeks. And then people were like, this is what we're doing. We're on board. And there was this really added benefit that was very important, which was she could accept the Biden money that was raised in the Biden campaign machinery. Anyone else would have had to start from zero, which would have been a very hard thing to do in a short period of time.
I want to talk a little bit about, I guess, 2028. It sounds so weird because it's 2025, but there are sort of some interesting and unique things that are going on right now. I've been starting to get emails from people. So let me back up. I've been talking about who's visibly fighting right now. Obviously, Gavin Newsom's fighting right now. Yeah. Whether it's a fight that will make a difference in 26, different people have different opinions. What's the math? What's the numbers? But in terms of, like, visibly fighting right now, Newsom's definitely there. Wes Moore's name has become increasingly interesting. I find him formidable. I saw him speak in a relatively small event a few months ago and was super impressed. Yeah. He just said yesterday, I'm not running in 2028. Yeah. There's a pretty interesting bench. Josh Shapiro and Gretchen Whitmer are interesting. There's people in the Senate. There's people in the House. I mean, there's a lot of kind of names right now. But I'm starting to get emails from people who are saying, the DNC has already decided it's Newsome. Moore's getting out of the way. He's clearing a path. It's just up to the DNC. Take the scenario however you want, but to what degree does the DNC decide, and particularly, like, this early?
The DNC decides nothing. I'll be very clear. There is no greater dissonance in American political discourse than the power people think the DNC has and the power it actually has.
Okay.
What DNC does have one important role to play here, which is like, for the first time, we don't know what the calendar is going to be. Right? We've been on this Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, South Carolina thing for, a couple decades now. That got tossed up in the air after the Iowa caucus meltdown of 2020. And then Biden, with the DNC under Biden, moving South Carolina to the front of the line. That was a one-time thing. So now it's an open question as to what's going to happen. That is a place where the DNC could theoretically put their thumb on the scale, but they won't. The people who make that decision is the Rules and Bylaws Committee. They don't have, or maybe there's a subcommittee on nominating. But either way, we're not in a situation where this is like Hillary Clinton running or the sitting vice president running where they control the DNC. It's really like, no, the DNC has no real influences. They're definitely not throwing it to Gavin Newsom. Maybe they came out and said the first primary was in San Francisco, the second primary was in Sacramento, and the third primary was in LA. You could say that, but in general, they're going to try to come up with the thing that will be the best for 2028, both the primary and then helping in the general by we've been in this thing where we spend all these money in states like Iowa and we organize the state to within an inch of its life, and then we leave and never come back again for 4 years. And so that's why you may get like a Michigan or something near the front of the line this time. But the DNC really has no power to rig it for anyone. And I promise anyone, they're not trying to. If they were trying to, they could not. And so, yeah, there are no power brokers who pick who the nominees are, especially now that people raise grassroots money so well through the internet. So you can't even get a collective of donors who could raise enough money to really like tip it for one person or else. It's like the people will really get to decide here, especially as we change the superdelegate rules too. So that's the one thing I'm not worried about is like the Democratic. I mean, you're watching the Democratic Party. It looks like they can bring something right now. So yeah.
So in that context, then, is your inkling that as early as it is, something really is happening with Newsom here? Or like, what do you make of the Newsom thing? Because his approval in California is up, his name recognition's up, his approval nationally is up. He's doing this. By the way, I'm participating in this fundraiser for the redistricting thing on Wednesday, which I think it's the only thing going on that I can really get behind, the No Kings protests and that. So I'm doing what I can. What do you think about this as a play for 28?
I would stipulate that I'm not participating in that fundraiser, but I think my podcast co-hosts are, and we've been involved in it. And I've talked to them. I think that Newsom has done a very good job as being one of the only Democrats who's found a way to actually get attention in this moment. And it was happening before the redistricting thing. It's happening after the redistricting thing. I think the rise, and he also is speaking in a language that the base agrees with. And the base, I don't mean the left. I don't mean the center. I mean the people who are deeply engaged in politics, who think Donald Trump is bringing our country to an end. And a bunch of Democrats are sort of fiddling Mount Rome burns. And he's saying Trump there might not be election 28. He is, I think, reflecting how the base feels. And I saw someone make this point, I can't remember who, which is, when people want a Democrat who's fighting, the only Democrat they're seeing fighting is Newsom, because he's the only one who's breaking through. Whether that will last him until the first, even if the election kicks off in early 2027, I'm kind of skeptical. But what he has shown, I don't think this boost will like carry him above anyone else, but it has opened doors for him, and it does show some inherent political media talent that people are going to be looking for in a candidate.
There is, one of the things I hear from the people in my audience who don't like Newsom is this guy's he's a centrist. He's center left or he's center, whatever. Let me zoom out a little bit from that. There's been a very spirited debate within my audience over the last week or so about, in the past, my view always was like, I'm not a socialist. I'm a social democrat. That's a form of capitalism. It's sort of like Denmark. Okay, everybody gets that. I've thought, for the most part, the socialists and I are kind of on the same page right now because our next stop is the same one. They want the bus to keep going. I want the bus to get to my stop and sort of that's it. Yeah. And so we're definitely working together here. But there's a growing section of my audience that is now kind of like, some of these actual socialists, from them staying home rather than voting Harris over Trump, from them kind of being indifferent to the impact of the Supreme Court when it was Hillary v. Trump. Are we really part of the same movement? Do we really want the same things? I don't know. I think I'm kind of making clear the question as to how fragmented or united are these different parts of the left. What's your kind of view?
I think the Democratic Party is quite divided. We're divided on every lane. We're divided ideologically. We are divided on issues. We're divided on which politicians are good. We're still like, it happens in our audience. It happens online. We're still divided over Joe Biden's decision to drop out. Right.
Is that right? There are people who think he should have stayed in.
Yeah, I mean, you saw that when Hunter Biden did his interview with Channel 5, and he came very aggressively after me and my co-host. Like, that was a thing that somehow, because Hunter made the point that, which I'm very sympathetic to feeling this way about your own father, that if he had stayed in the race, he would have won. And so there is this people, Jamie Harrison, the former DNC chair, carries this point a lot, that the reason we lost is because Democrats melted down instead of sticking with Biden. Like, that's a conversation that goes on, just kind of like we debated the 2016 primary for a decade, sometimes still do, I guess. I joke that we're divided over Ezra Klein's latest book, right? Like, we're fighting over abundance versus populism and all of that. I think I've tried to simplify this in my own head, that the real division is not left, right. It's not on any individual. Those are all real division on the issue, but the central divide is whether you think Trump is an existential threat to democracy, to our freedoms, to our rights, to the country as we know it, or whether you think he is really, really bad, but largely survivable. Like, that's how I think of the difference between Newsome and Whitmer. That's how I sort of think about the people who sat out or plan to continue to sit out because they didn't get their policy purposes. That could be center, that could be left, or whatever it is. And that's sort of the main divide, because it helps you sort of understand why Newsom takes this giant step to do the redistricting, which is putting a fair amount of skin in the game, and Schumer votes to fund the government in April or March, whenever that was. Why Newsom's doing what he's doing, J.B. Pritzker is talking the way he's talking, Murphy's talking the way he's talking, and why Gretchen Whitmer is meeting with Trump to deliver for the state of Michigan, right? It's like two understandings of the world that explain, I think, I think that's the division that is preventing us as a party organization from mounting a unified, vociferous response to Trump.
Couple quick things in the last few minutes we have. One on Pritzker, one on Newsom, two people you just mentioned. Did you see the interview where Pritzker was asked whether he's on Ozempic?
I saw that the write-up, but I didn't see the actual interview. What did he say?
Well, he just said, he was very direct. He goes, I don't think I'm going to answer that. And then he goes, because there are people who are taking the drugs and
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your take on it as a political answer, because I loved the directness where he goes, I'm not going to answer that. His explanation didn't really make sense. Like, the fact that some people are on it and some people aren't means he's not going to tell us. It was kind of like, I guess he tries not to shame anybody one way or the other. But I was going to ask you whether it made sense from the standpoint of he was clearly prepared for the question. Did the preparation make sense?
Yeah, that is a classic comms prep of a politician. Is we've decided we're not going to answer the question, so we're going to give you the best non-answer possible, which is almost always unsatisfactory. Right? Like, do I care if he's on Ozempic? No. Should anyone care? Probably not. Will people be annoying about it because he didn't answer the question? Probably.
Right. Okay, fair. On Newsom.
Yeah.
If he loses, if California decides not to do the redistricting in the vote, which is sort of like Newsom loses it, right? How damaging is that to his potential 28 run? Like, does the outcome of this November on that matter for his chances in 28?
I think it would not end if his measure were to fail. It would not end his campaign. It would. I mean, he could bounce back from that. It would be a blow, because it would say something about his political operation. It would be an opportunity cost, because if he actually passed it, he would get a boost.
Right.
I don't think he's taking a risk by doing it. I really don't think it would ruin his campaign. I think people actually appreciate him actually trying when others did not. But I think it's hard to argue it wouldn't be a blow of some kind.
Last thing I want to ask you, as we get closer to this primary, do you, on a personal level, do you think it's good / do you want independent shows like Pod Save and my show and Brian Tyler Cohen and everybody. Should we be coming out early in the primary and pushing one candidate over another? Like, do you think it would be good for people to go, okay, the Pod Save guys are behind this candidate, and then David Pakman's behind that candidate? Or do you think that the movement is not well served by everybody coming out early and endorsing primary candidates?
I think everyone should do what they want to do, and if it, because like what makes independent media and content creation work for people is the authenticity. So if like you or Brian were to decide you like this candidate or this candidate, like I would probably encourage you to just go for it. We have not had any real detailed discussions about how we're going to handle 2028. In 2020, we interviewed every single candidate except Joe Biden, who didn't come on our podcast. And we wanted to be a forum where they could come on. We were doing special 1 hour episodes, around 1 hour episodes. So we could have like an extended conversation to introduce our audience to people. It was very beneficial for Pete Buttigieg. Did it very early in the process when no one knew who he was. And he did great. It was one of those things. It was like in that moment where Pete was sort of taking off and our audience was like, who is this guy? And so I think I'm assuming we'll probably do something like that again. That we never got to a point in 2020 where you can see maybe as it narrows down and you get to the end and there's like two people and you have a strong feeling about one or the other, you could possibly get involved. For us, there were four of us, so it may be weird if like two of us were like, we're for Newsome, the other two were like, we're for Pritzker. But we haven't thought about it a lot. But I think if people think uh somebody, someone is good and they want to do it, I would kind of encourage them to do it because I think it's probably, it's what it's maybe challenging for your audience. We saw that in 2020 for us because there were people who, even if we didn't have our thumb on the scale when we like criticized a candidate or were not happy with their debate performance, the supporters of candidate X were very always upset with us and like there was fair dissension. But if you think someone really is the best chance to win and the best president, like probably go for it.
I want to hear from our audiences too.
Yeah,
like, are you interested in these shows all staking out who they're kind of supporting? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I think so.
We've been speaking with Dan Pfeiffer. Dan, so good to talk to you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your time, and I'd love to do this again.
Yeah, this was so much fun. Great to finally connect.
All right, take care.
You too.
Bye.